So with the Labour Party coming in, let's assume that you do win now and in the next election and are able to take over control. Are you going to change the scrutiny process at all to make it somewhat more, have more teeth?
I've always believed that it ought to be more transparent, the scrutiny committee. I think it's the most important committee of council where it looks at the business performance of council. We have a responsibility to do it. But what's happened currently is that because we were carrying out close scrutiny as the leader of the opposition, when I was went forward for the chair of scrutiny, the Conservative administration said that I was totally unacceptable to them, and so I couldn't take that position. I've made it clear to my group that I'd want to see in a very effective scrutiny committee, and that the responsibility for that ought to be handed over to the opposition groups, that the overview and committee chairs ought to be them, the scrutiny committee chair ought to be members of the opposition group, so that the administration could be held to account. And that way you'd have a very effective one with the necessary outcomes.
And what about the situation where, as you say, I don't know, that two people made the decision that they would spend £450,000? Would you change that and put a limit on the spending of an individual?
Yes.
To what?
I'm not quite certain of that at this stage. Probably to a lot less figure. You're right. You know, they would have to publish where the money is going in. I think there has to be some discretion by officers for lesser sums of money, but I'm not quite certain at this stage.
When we were discussing about Wi-Fi before, it was announced in November 2009 that the scheme was going to launch, and there was a big blaze of publicity. We talked about it on the show. At what point when that was announced, did the Labour group know about it before? Did you know about it when it was in the news that day? Or was it discussed at all with anybody from the other parties before that?
It wasn't discussed with us, and we knew it through the media.
So you found out from the press from that day that it...
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, moving on away from Wi-Fi, because it's a subject that we do get criticised that we do tend to harp on, but we also have many other areas. Let's take the Mechanics Institute. What are we going to do with it?
What's the current position with it?
The current position, I'm assuming that the Mechanics Institute was rotting and decaying under the last Labour control area, and has continued to deteriorate. £1.2 million spent on holding it in its position where it currently is?
Labour was offered, when we were in control, we were offered the mechanics for £1.
Mm-hmm.
We knew at that stage that there would need to be major investments and the revenue cost was unaffordable. That was proved with hindsight to be right, because we had one of the fastest growing rates in the country, because we spent that money that we could have spent, by purchasing the mechanics in services. The consequence of it went into private hands, and they failed to deliver, right, and secure the mechanics and put it back into the state that it ought to be.
Having seen some photographs of it, it's in a pretty poor state at the moment. I mean, what do we do with it now? There's got to be a point where you come and say, right, cut the losses, let's just tear it down. Have we reached there?
No, we haven't reached there. I'm a local member where the mechanics is sited. I think my family are very, very concerned about our heritage and the need to maintain the mechanics. And we're working with people like the Princess Trust to come forward with a business plan to rescue it.
If we rescue it and put it back into its former state, one, we've got to decide which state is its former state, and two, is it not now a parody of what it was?
It probably is. But the question mark is, we cannot ignore the fact, and we need to work with other agencies to try and bring it in. And I'm hopeful that there might be some break in the situation as a result of what's taken place.
Why? Why should we bring it back? Why should we put it back into a state that people can go into? What purpose is there?
I think the purpose is it's part of Swindon. It's part of Swindon. It's part of our heart. It's part of our community. And we have a responsibility to try and ensure that it's it's brought back in some form to retain it. The other option is, which may not be an option, is to knock the building down or wait till it falls down. And I don't think that the planning regulations or English heritage would allow that to happen.
Some of the figures I've seen is that to actually put that back into a reasonable condition is going to cost up to £25 million. We're talking about cuts, and I did ask you earlier where you would envisage the cuts. £25 million coming out of the budget. I mean, where are these? You're going to have to cut elsewhere. Where would the cuts be?
And the answer is, we wouldn't be investing 25 million because we haven't got 25 million to bring that about. But I'm certain that within the private sector and other agencies, I'm living in hope that something could happen within the next 5 years.
And do what with it then? What? I mean, we bring it back up to a standard and do what with the mechanics?
What I'm unable to discuss this any further with you on this, as the Prince's Trust is looking at it, and there are some plans that are flowing about currently, and that's the only hope to bring it back into being.
Derek, that also brings me up to another subject, of course. You've got yourself into a bit of trouble over this, haven't you?
Most certainly.
Well, tell us exactly what's happened, or as far as you can, as far as sub judice goes.
Well, it's difficult for me to discuss this matter. As you're clearly aware from the media, I've been taken to standards for highlighting the cost exceeding what was originally raised. That's how politics played out. And I've got to just face on and deal with that matter when I'm disciplined or reprimanded or investigated on this, but I'm unable to discuss this matter further with you.
You talked before, Derek, about cuts before, and we mentioned them earlier as well. There's a cut in Swindon that's going to happen in June, or at least it's going to be felt from June, which is that Swindon Borough Council's subsidy for bus services in the town is going to be, from what I understand, withdrawn entirely. It's never happened before. This is for evening and weekend bus services. Can you tell us more about that and what the Labour group is doing to try and lessen the impact of that?
I think bus services, like a lot of other services, are being cut currently. The Conservative administration's policy is to eliminate subsidies. And part of that process, right, is to cut subsidies to the bus service. That would have an impact on low-income groups more so than others, not only because they haven't got cars to go about in. A lot of them are reliant on the bus service for employment. So that's a concerning fact. But it goes further than this. Subsidies are being cut to various other services, to recreation and other areas, and the pricing policy is being affected with a hike up of prices. So I'm just making a point that we, as a party, are concerned about the most vulnerable within our communities, and it's one area, that we will try and mitigate those cuts.
Okay, Derek, so now you're really confusing me, because I've got this bag of money, which is Swindon's budget for next year. You keep telling me where you're not going to cut, so that bag of money is now too small for all the money, all the expenses which we're going to be paying. Where are you going to cut?
Well, we certainly won't be hitting the most vulnerable in our community. Core to our policies would be in ensuring jobs, housing, regeneration, fairness. Now, all that would regenerate and bring in more income. But what we will do is we will hit senior management costs and cut it by 30%. Hospitality, right, we will cut the budgets on that, and we've identified it currently. Communications budgets, we will cut that by nearly $500,000. Hospitality by 51,000. Local government bodies, we've got something like £72,000. External consultants are being used fairly widely currently, and I think there's nearly £500,000 on it.